What happened to the people who doxed Jewish artists? A victim speaks out.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a Helpman Award winner. This is Alexis Fishman.
Each morning I get up out of dial and Paris down on my feet.
I went to Mariah College and I actually had an incredible arts education there, and very sort of proud to share that whenever I talk to people, which is that Mariah had a fantastic wide scope of performing arts education. You know, it's funny because it's a modern Orthodox Jewish day school, so you wouldn't necessarily think that a sort of a relatively conservative community like ours would be so supportive of the arts. I think for me, you know, I wouldn't say there's many graduates that have gone into professional arts careers.
For once in my lifetime, I feel like a giant. I soar like an eagle.
Before moving to New York, I did two very big musicals in Australia. One was called Dusty, and the other one was Shout, and I worked at the Sydney Theatre Company. And since moving to New York, I've sort of maintained a presence in theatre, kind of even since being there. I've returned a lot and done theatre, but I've also moved into doing a lot of solo shows and cabaret. So I've done an Amy Winehouse show and a show set in Berlin in 1933, and a few other interesting sort of solo projects. And then most recently, a play called Anne Being Frank, which sort of flips the Anne Frank, a solo play that I didn't write, but that flips the Anne Frank story sort of on its head, which is a really you know, powerful piece of theatre.
Mark my words, an absolute explosion.
Now let's turn our attention to Australia, where hundreds of Jewish people came under attack this month, not physically but online.
Published the names, images, professions and social media accounts of almost 600 Jewish people.
The targeting of people because they happen to be Jewish.
The way that this whole doxing, you know, episode occurred was supposedly through a WhatsApp group that a whole lot of Jewish artists were a part of. I wasn't actually in that WhatsApp group, so you know it's even more of an indication of the underlying kind of nasty hatred of what these people were doing, which was to just find Jewish artists, regardless of what anybody had said about the current conflict. Yeah, so I don't know. My photo was included in that group, and I'm still not quite sure how or why or who.
I've had hate mail, I've had social media abuse.
As a result of being placed on that list and doxed, I've received a lot of vicious online harassment. Since then I've received swastikas, I've been called a cancer, I've had people tell me that my child is going to be ashamed of me for being so delusional. It's been relentless and ongoing.
The increasing use of online platforms to harm people through practices like doxing, the malicious release of their personal information without their permission, is a deeply disturbing development.
They shared a list of 600 Zionists that, you know, supposedly were the worst people on the planet and needed to be public information was shared. It was name and photo, but other people's sort of full email addresses and occupations and all sorts of things were shared. And they were subsequently harassed, from what I understand.
Did you cop any of that?
I didn't, thankfully. I didn't, because I think that there's, you know, there was, you know, an array of examples, but there was some very serious harassment that occurred out of it. The only thing that I felt was pride, to be honest, to be included on a list of Zionists, because I'm a proud Zionist and a proud Jew, and you know, but I wouldn't have said that, I don't think, had I experienced any negative, you know, repercussions. The hardest thing in this case was that, you know, Israel and the Jewish people had just experienced the most horrific attack. You know, not just a military invasion, but the most awful crimes. It was a really horrifying time to be Jewish because of that, but then on top of it, so quickly we were blamed and vilified. And
I've had direct messages and messages on my own pages and feeds, accusing me of being, a genocidal right-wing extremist, which is probably the exact opposite of where I stand.
It was like, well, hang on a minute, we've just experienced an attack. We've been the victims of this. We've had our women raped and our children slaughtered and and at that stage 230 plus people taken hostage, of which 130 plus of them are still there. And then on top of it, to experience somehow, abuse and blame and awful vilification of Jews, forgetting Israel or Israeli policy or what you believe about that, was really very, very confronting. And I think, I think just a reminder, sadly, that this has happened to the Jews in every generation. We just don't seem to be able to escape this level of hatred.